Welcome to DT tutorial. In this video we are looking at cell. So what is cell? Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. When we're talking of the word basic simply means smallest. So we can say that cell is the smallest structural and functional unit of life. Basic can also mean fundamental. So we can say also that cell is the fundamental, structural, and functional unit of life. So any organism you see, the structure and the function they exhibit is as a result of the cell. So it is the basic, the smallest or the fundamental structural and functional unit of life. The human body, for instance, is made up of 50 to 100 trillions of cells. It is these cells that makes up the structure and the function of the human body. The human body is made up of different kinds of cells that varies in numbers. For example, the brain cell is made up of about 171 billions of cells. So it is these small units, these basic units that makes up the structure and the function of the brain. So cell, like we said, is the basic structural and functional unit of life, or we can also say is the smallest or the fundamental structural and functional unit of life. So all these organisms, they are structured the way they are, they function the way they are as a result of the cell that they are made up of. So cell is the basic, the smallest, or the fundamental structural and functional unit of life. So having known the definition of cell, let's look at the discovery of cell. So cell discovery is accrued to these 5 scientists. We have Robert Hooke in 1665, Felix Dujardin in 1835, Matthias Claden in 1838, Theodor Schwann in 1839, and lastly Rudolf von Virchow in 1855. So these are the scientists that discovered cell. So the first one we have here, of the first scientist we have here, is Robert Hooke in 1665. Robert Hooke discovered cell in 1665, and he was actually, or is actually, the first scientist to discover cell. So this is very important. You can be asked in an exam, which of the following scientists is the first to discover cell? It is Robert Hooke. So Robert Hooke discovered cell in 1665. And how did he discover cell? He discovered cell when he used a microscope. He used a microscope to view a thin slice of a cork of an oak tree. And when he used this microscope to view this thin slice of a cork of an oak tree, he saw that the cork of the oak tree is made up of, or looks like a honeycomb. So when he used the microscope to view the thin slice of the cork of an oak tree, he discovered that the thing was like a honeycomb. So this was how he discovered cell. So again, how did Robert Hooke in 1665 discover cell? He discovered cell when he used a microscope to view a thin slice of a cork of an oak tree. When he viewed that thin slice of the cork of an oak tree, he discovered that the thing looks like a honeycomb. So this is the cork of an oak tree. The cork is the bark. So when he peeled out a thin slice of the bark of this tree and viewed it under a microscope, he discovered that the thing looks like this. So this is what we call a honeycomb. A honeycomb. So he discovered that the bark of the tree was like a honeycomb, and later he called all these small compartments cell. So he was actually the first to discover cell. So Robert Hooke in 1665, he was the first scientist to discover cell, and discovered cell in 1665. And how did he discover cell? He discovered cell when he used a microscope to view a thin slice of a cork of an oak tree. And when he viewed the cork of the oak tree, he discovered that the back of the oak tree looks like a honeycomb, and he called those small compartments within the honeycomb cell. So this was how Robert Hooke discovered cell in 1665. So before we progress further, let's look at this why question in 1992. The question is, the first scientist to describe the cell was. The first scientist to describe the cell was. So as we've discussed before, Robert Hooke in 1665 was the first scientist to discover cell. So the first scientist to describe the cell was it Charles Darwin? No. Was it Matthias Cledin? No. Was it Robert Hooke? Yes. Robert Hooke was the first scientist to discover cell, and he discovered cell in 1665. He discovered cell in the year 1665. And how did he discover cell? He discovered cell when he viewed a thin slice, of the cork of an oak tree under a microscope. And when he viewed this cork of an oak tree under a microscope, he discovered that the thing looks like a honeycomb. And I've already showed you what a honeycomb is. So this is all you need to know about Robert Hooke discovery of cell. So is it Theodore Schwann? No. Is it Felix Dujardin? No. So the first scientist to describe the cell was actually Robert Hooke. So this is very important. So the next scientist that we have here is Felix Dujardin, and he discovered cell in 1835. So the notable things to note about Felix Dujardin's discovery of cell in 1835 is that he was the scientist that discovered the protoplasm of the cell, and the protoplasm is the living part of the cell. So how did he discover the protoplasm? He discovered it when he was studying the foraminifera. He observed that the fluid came out of its shell, and he named the fluid sarcode, which was later called protoplasm. So one thing that you should just note about Felix Dujardin's discovery of cell in 1835 is the year he discovered cell, which is in 1835, and what he discovered. What he discovered was the protoplasm of the cell, which is the living part of the cell. And protoplasm is composed of the entire cell, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and everything inside. So he was the one that discovered this part of the cell, which is the protoplasm, the living part of the cell. Then the other scientists that we have Matthias Cledin in 1838, and what he discovered was that the bodies of plants are made up of cells. He discovered that the body of plants are made up of cells. Then we have Theodore Schwann in 1839. He discovered that the bodies of animals are made up of cells. So Matthias Cledin discovered in 1838 that the bodies of plants are made up of cells. Theodore Schwann in 1839, so know the difference between the years 1838, 1839. He discovered that the bodies of animals are made up of cells. Then lastly, Rudolf von Virchow. Rudolf von Virchow in 1855 discovered that all cells come from pre-existing cells. All cells come from pre-existing cells, and we're going to explain this in when we will talk about the theories of cells. So this is all you need to know about the discovery of cell. So just a quick recap about the discovery of cell. The discovery of cell is accrued to these 5 notable scientists. We have Robert Hooke in 1665. Like I said, he was the first scientist to discover cell. Then we have Felix Dujardin in 1835. And Dujardin, the notable thing about Dujardin's discovery of cell in 1835 was that he was the scientist that discovered the protoplasm of the cell. And I've said that the protoplasm of the cell is the living part of the cell. Then we have Matthias Cledin in 1838. So Matthias Cledin discovery of cell, what is it about? He discovered that the bodies of plants are made up of cell. Theodor Schwann in 1839 discovered that the bodies of animals are made up of cell, while Rudolf von Virchow in 1855 discovered that all cells all cells come from what? Come from pre-existing cell. And like I said, I'm going to explain this when we will talk about the theories of cells. So these are the 5 notable scientists that discovered cell. Robert Hooke was the first to discover cell, and he discovered cell in 1665. Felix Dujardin in 1835 discovered the protoplasm of the cell, and the protoplasm is the living part of the cell. The living part of the cell. Very important. Then Matthias Cledin in 1838 discovered that the bodies of plants are made up of cells. Theodor Schwann in 1839 discovered that the bodies of animals are made up of cells, while Rudolf von Virchow in 1855 discovered that all cells come from pre-existing cells. So this is all you need to know about the discovery of cell. So before we move to cell theory, let's look at some past questions on cell discovery. So I have here, this is a NECO question 2001, and the question is, which scientist did not contribute to the formulation of cell theory? Which scientist did not contribute to the formulation of cell theory? So there are 5 notable scientists that contributed to the formulation of cell theory or cell discovery. So the theory here, we're simply talking of referring to cell discovery. So theory or cell discovery. So which of these scientists from this option did not contribute to the formulation of cell theory or discovery? So is it Isaac Newton? Yes, Isaac Newton did not contribute to the formulation of cell theory. Isaac Newton did work in physics, not in cell theory and biology. So Isaac Newton is known for his work in gravitation or motion. So to be more concise, he is known for his scientific work in motion. So Matthias Cledin contributed to the formulation of cell theory, so it's not Matthias Cledin. Robert Hooke contributed to the discovery of cells, so it's not Robert Hooke. Theodor Schwann contributed to the formulation of cell discovery or cell theory, so it's not Theodor Schwann. So the scientist that did not contribute to the formulation of cell theory or cell discovery is Isaac Newton. So let's look at the other question here. It's a why question and it's from the year 1989. So the scientist who discovered the honeycomb of cell is it Robert Hooke? Yes, it was Robert Hooke that discovered the honeycomb of cell. And remember, how did he discover the honeycomb of cell? He discovered cell in the year 1665. And he discovered cell when he used a microscope to view the bark or the cork of an oak tree. And when he used the microscope to view it, he saw that the thing looks like a honeycomb, and he called it cell. So the scientist who discovered the honeycomb of cell was actually Robert Hooke, and he discovered that in 1665. So just a quick recap, Felix Dujardin was the one that discovered the protoplasm of the cell, which is the living part of the cell. Then Matthias Cledin discovered that the bodies of plants are made up of cells, while Theodor Schwann discovered that the bodies of animals are made up of cells. So this is very important. Then the last question we're going to look at here is a why question in the year 1992. And the question is, the first scientist to describe the cell was. The first scientist to describe cell was. So we've discussed this before. So is it Charles Darwin? No. Is it Matthias Claden? No. Matthias Claden discovered cell in 1838. Is it Robert Hooke? Yes. Robert Hooke discovered cell in 1665, and he was actually the first scientist to discover cell. Is it Theodore Schwann? No. Theodore Schwann discovered cell in 1839. And is it Felix Dujardin? No. Felix Dujardin discovered cell in 1835. So the first scientist to actually describe cell was Robert Hooke, and he discovered cell in 1665. So we have looked at the discovery of cell, and I've said that the discovery of cell accrues to these five scientists: Robert Hooke in 1665, Felix Dujardin in 1835, Matthias Claden in 1838, Theodor Schwann in 1839, and Rudolf von Virchow in 1855. So it's very important that you know uh, the year they discovered cell and what they discovered about the cell. Like I said, the Robert Hooke was the first scientist to discover cell. And when you see the word honeycomb, you should know that this discovery of cell regarding honeycomb um, is attributed to Robert Hooke. Then Felix Dujardin in 1835, he discovered the protoplasm of the cell, the protoplasm, which is the living part of the cell. And Matthias Claden in 1838 discovered that the bodies of plants are made up of cells. Then Theodor Schwann in 1839 discovered that the bodies of animals is made up of cells. Then Rudolf von Virchow in 1855 discovered that all cells they come from pre-existing cells. So all these you must pre-existing cells. So all these you must take note of from pre-existing cells. So the next thing that we have here is cell theory. So we'll continue with this in the next class.